Xenos Rampant. It's so beautiful. All right, that's enough of that. It's just a book, for crying out loud. I'm Mr. Wargaming. Welcome to the House of Wargaming. I'm assuming you're all in on Xenos Rampant. This is a first look, not a review. I am unable to be impartial because I already know how much I enjoy this game. I enjoy it enough to have bought it 4 times now. I got Rebels and Patriots. I got Dragon Rampant. I got Lion Rampant. I don't have the Men Who Would Be Kings, and I don't have Pikeman's Lament. That's the Colonial and the Pike and Shot era versions of this. Some of the rules that we're going to talk about today may have been included in those titles. They're new to me, so you know, if I say, wow, this is a really great and innovative thing, and you've been doing it for a couple of years, hey, that's fantastic. Go ahead and put that in the comments. You're a wargamer. You are probably a low time. Oh, this is Biscotti, by the way. You are probably a low time preference individual. You have the brains to be patient to wait until tomorrow for something better than what you could get today. You'll put an order in for figures that are going to take 6 weeks to get to you. It's going to take another 6 weeks before you get them assembled and painted on the table. Let's kind of cut that down just a little bit. I'm going to tell you what you need to purchase in order to play Xenos Rampant. I'm going to tell you, kind of the model counts and that sort of thing. And then we're going to move into a deep dive into the mechanics and why a rule set that's suitable for medieval can be reskinned to so effectively apply to science fiction. Let's go to the table. Don't worry, we're not going to do a real flip through. I'm using this as my public notes. I'm not the kind of guy that writes a 20-minute script and then reads it off in front of a bookshelf full of unplayed games, so you'll think I'm to lend myself additional credibility. I think my words stand for themselves. I use these as kind of my notes, and we're going to go real deep on this. We're going to do two things, as I said. We're going to take a look at what you need to get started, and then we're going to get into the guts. We're going to go, man, we are going 3 knuckles deep into this bad boy. So if you are interested in playing Xenos Rampant, first thing to be aware of is it's base 5. Most of the titles in this series are base 6, but here we have support infantry, 5 strength points. Now that does mean that you can use 1 figure. You could play this game as a giant stompy robot game. Your robot has 5 strength points, track the wounds. Or, and a lot of the art backs this up, you could use 5 guys. And it doesn't matter whether it's elite infantry, heavy infantry, light infantry, support infantry, berserk infantry. You kind of know what those are. You've been around the block a few times. You're going to start with 5 guys. Your terrible troops, your militia, those are going to have 10. And you can even upgrade those to 15 strength points. So they've got 15 wounds. And believe me, brother, they're going to need it because they're pretty terrible. We've seen in previous videos how things like the, in the fantasy version, peasants, man, they just melt away. 15 of them, they're going to be a little more sticky, and they might actually be worth the points that you spend. Now, that said, it's not a parking lot game. You're not going to need a lot of vehicles. In fact, the rules explicitly say when we get to the vehicle profiles here, and I'm not going to talk about, as I said, I'm assuming you have some experience with this rule set, so I'm not going to talk about how the actual game is played. I'm not going to talk about, what these various things mean, the attack 5 up. Take it for what it is. You guys know how the game is played. But I did want to point out that the vehicles, so you've got fighting vehicles, you've got transport vehicles, and you only get one or the other. You're not going to see giant tank battles. This is very much a Crossfire situation. Crossfire was written to be an infantry game, and people said, hey, I'm going to add a tank. And the author was like, well, it's not designed for that. It's not going to work well. And then it didn't work well, and everyone got mad because his game, it's that stupid cat doesn't even bark. That stupid dog doesn't meow. This dog does not meow. It's primarily an infantry-based game. That said, you can get a few more soft-skin vehicles. So these are things like technicals or even walkers. You can have a couple of those. Scout vehicles, right? So you can have more than one vehicle, but really the game is built for, it looks like this. You could play this in 2mm or 6mm. Instead of using individual soldiers, you could have a fire team of 6mm guys, and then your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fire teams or squads, I guess you could call it. There's your platoon, and as your platoon takes damage. So technically, with only that minor change, this could be a mass battle game. There is unit cohesion, and you have the typical setbacks where you don't get too close. Stay out of my personal space unless we're going to do some meleeing. That stays the same. Now, That's what you need to know. All right, then there's tons of special rules. I mean, the book includes a lot of space opera. Oh, what do we got here? Like specific army lists for suggestions for the federated planets, right? And then there's some rule changes to help. But yeah, like the Alliance landing party, the Evil Empire, which could be, you know, the War in the Stars, or it could be the Klingons, boarding parties, space pirates, Xenos Rampant. How about that, right? And this would be the 40K analog. Would be the what do you call the big bugs? You know what they are: primitives, ancients, starship crew, robots, all kinds of stuff. And that's just for the space opera. They do have post-apocalypse. This is literally your zombie hordes out in the wastelands. And then you've even got kind of a Mad Maxy thing going on there. You've got, modern day. This one could be a lot of fun. Modern day Operation Paperclip, right? You're kind of X-Files-ish thing. A lot of the art in this book is 28 millimeter, but not all of it. It's not exclusive. I'll bet you if I take the time to flip through, I can find. There you go. Round Zero Games. Czar and SWAT Police. Looks like they're on Sabbats, too, which might help you when you're moving your boys around. Note the Czar, there are 3 of them on a base. I have done this in the past where I go, look, this guy has 1 wound, this guy has 1 wound, and this guy has 3 wounds. So bing, 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 and then I have to start using wound markers on my leader. You don't have to use 5 figures. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about the rules that make this perfectly suited for near future and far-flung science fiction. How does it differ from Dragon Rampant? And before we get into this, I should warn you guys, every war game tells a story, and every war game is a mystery all on its own. Through the course of play, you discover what works, what doesn't work, and you discover these little hidden intricacies of the rules. I'm going to spoil those for you. If you don't want to be spoiled, flip to this timestamp right here, okay? Because for a lot of us, resolving these mysteries is a big part of the fun, and I don't want to ruin that fun for you. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how moving to base 5 changes the game. I have 12d6 here, and we're just going to assume that we've got an average unit attacking with an ability of 4. They hit on 4s up, and they're attacking a unit with an armor of 3. When I am using a 12 strength point unit, on a 4 up, I'm going to hit half of the time. If I'm attacking a unit with an armor of 3, I'm going to do 2 hits. Pretty basic math here, right? Now, if I take away 2 of those dice, because I'm using base 10, and I still hit half the time, on average, I'm going to get 5 hits. And that means I'm going to do 1 strength point of damage. Okay, so that means that on any given attack, you are likely to do less damage. That's very true. However, remember that our boys, instead of starting from a strength point of 12, most of them are starting with just 5 strength points. So in the case where we had 12 dice that were being rolled, it would take 6 attacks to reduce the unit to 0 strength points. In the case of rolling 10 dice on your attack, it will take 5. So the units, although you're rolling fewer dice, just on the basis of how many hits it takes, they're not going to stick around as long. Not only that, but the thing you have to understand about this game is that it has a wonderful rule called firefight. Well, there's 2 rules. One is most units can shoot all the way across the board. They have an effective firing range where, as you might expect, they can fire effectively, but even at a distance, they can still shoot. If they can see you, they can shoot you. And even if they only get 2 hits, 2 successes, not enough to cause a wound, all they need is a hit, you are suppressed. That's the first thing to be aware of, that it doesn't take a wound anymore to have to start making morale checks. The other issue is you're going to be shooting at a much greater distance. There's going to be a lot more dice rolled in this game. The fact that you don't have to wait until you're within 18 inches of the other guys, that you can just start plonking away at them right away, means that, yeah, you're rolling fewer dice per attack, sure, right? These 2 are not being rolled, but you're rolling more attack dice on average. The deadliness of the game is also compounded by the fact that you've got free activations. Elite Infantry automatically shoot on their activation. If you choose a shoot order, they just do it. Heavy infantry, same way. Although it's not in focus. There we go. See, free. Not everybody has that, but the fact that anybody does means that you're going to be doing more shooting. If you are a smart wargamer, which you are, I can tell because you're watching this channel, you will use all of your free orders up first. Then you'll move on to the orders that have the potential for failure and the potential for ending your turn. What that means is there's going to be even more shooting going on because you don't have to pass an activation test in order to open fire with probably like half of your units. Way more dice being thrown around, way more lead and little bolts of light being flung hither and yon. Yeah, you're definitely going to want to take advantage of not just more terrain, but also, again, we got this push me, pull you. There's a rule in here called go to ground. Instead of moving, even if you're in wide open, you can basically take cover wherever you're at. Your guys are assumed to be, either digging hasty and impromptu foxholes or finding rocks, gullies, where you're not playing on a bowling green, you're playing in the real world. They'll find tree stumps. Infantry are good at when the bullets start flying, infantry will take cover and they will find every little bit of cover they can. Also, you've got this situation called firefight. Now, previous iterations of the game, Xenos Rampant had a unit called light cavalry. I think Bidors had the ability to skirmish as well. Skirmish allowed you to attack the opponent in your opponent's phase. When your opponent tried to come to grips with a unit of light cavalry, on a 7 or better, the light cavalry, hey look, I got it. The light cavalry could take a shot and then make a half move away. They're shooting at your guys on your turn. How fair is that? Well, in Xenos Rampant, pretty much everybody can do that. I don't think like the rabble and the militia, and if they're not armed with firearms, of course they can't. But once per turn, your enemy units can return fire, which means, and that, again, you're only rolling 10 dice per attack, but there's fewer strength points on the table, and you're rolling way more attack dice. That really changes the game in some surprising ways. One of the other ways it changes the game is you don't want to get caught out of cover. You're going to need that cover because the game is so much more deadly. Your table should be nice and crowded in order to overcome this. Already talked about the fact that just a simple hit has the potential to trigger a morale check, even if it doesn't cause any wounds. You should also be aware of the subtle interplay between this and the morale rules, because the morale rules now do something a little bit different. If you are at full strength, if you're greater than half strength, you're rolling 2 dice. Most courages are, kind of a waste. Most courages are in the, 3 to 4 to maybe 5 range. So that's not going to be too hard. On your first attack, bear in mind, in a base 12 system, our average hit, that morale check is going to be at -2. In a base 10, that first morale check will be at -1. You're going to make just as many morale checks, but the step down is going to be a lot less. It's going to be, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's not quite as big a step with each of those morale checks. Not only that, but in Xenos Rampant, and this is it's just one line, but man, does it open things up. If you're at full strength, you're using 2 dice. If you are at half strength, once your unit is reduced to half strength, you're only rolling 1d6, and you are still taking a negative modifier for every wound that you have received to date, which means not only is it harder to make the morale check, but it's a lot more likely that you are going to roll a 0 or negative number, which eliminates the unit from the board altogether. So it is more deadly in that respect. However, there's a lot of little push me, pull you things going on here. There's a lot of, who wrote this thing? I should have said this earlier. Well, it's Dan Mersey, of course, is the OG, and then Richard Cowan has added his. I don't want to call it 5 cents because it's worth way more than that. He has added his little variations to the Xenos game, which are really interesting. Particularly the notion that if you fail a morale check and you have to retreat, if you're in cover, you're good. You're just suppressed. And suppressed is what we called, in previous iterations of the rules, we called, what was it, startled? I'm drawing a mental blank here. If you fail your courage test, you are rattled, battered. You're not battered, you're suppressed. And if you are suppressed in cover, you just stay in cover. It's cool, man. If you can move, so here's our boys. These guys are shooting at these guys. These guys have lost their morale check. They can move to cover. They can actually move closer to the guys shooting at them if there's cover available. Now, if there's not, if they're over here, they can move to cover. But if there's no cover available, then they have to move directly away from the guy that's shooting at them. So that's a very important wrinkle. That really changes the game, and I think that makes the game, it gives the game that modern or sci-fi flavor, that it's not two lines running at each other, and it's not like when you fail those tests, you just run away. In this one, you are going to need to use cover to full advantage. Now, the other great part about this, so that's kind of it for the how lethal is the game. It's more lethal, but you're going to adjust for that by using a lot more cover in your game. So ultimately, that step down from 12 to 10 and 6 to 5 isn't going to have as big an effect as you think it will. The other thing I wanted to talk about that gives this a distinctly modern flavor is another one of those second-order effects that arises from the fact that you've got a lot of different special abilities that negate each other. Let's take a look at the heavy vehicles. This fighting vehicle here starts out with an armor of 6. Whoa, time out, bro. I gotta roll 6 hits, and I've only got 10 dice to do that. Man, on a 3-up, on a 4-up, you're averaging 5 hits. It's going to take a lucky hit to just do 1 strength point of damage to this guy. However, there are special upgrade abilities. Remember I think we looked at the support unit. You can upgrade them with anti-tank capabilities that reduce the armor of vehicles by half. So this guy's armor now becomes 3. You got to pay the points for it. And in a lot of cases where you say, yeah, I want to be good at this one thing, you're losing the ability somewhere else. Maybe you can reach out and shoot further without penalties, but you are going to be worse at melee combat. So there is a lot of balancing there. And what winds up happening with this kind of situation where I have a unit and I need to decide, is that unit good at fighting infantry or is it good at fighting vehicles? They're mutually exclusive. I got to pick one. What that means is that you wind up with a very rock, paper, scissors feel to the battle. And that is a very modern development. Well, for certain degrees of modern, right? The Napoleonics is infamous for that. You've got infantry, cavalry, and artillery. And A beats B, B beats C, and C beats A. Gaslands works in much the same manner, that you've got racers, you've got shooters, and you've got crashers. And shooters are really good at handling, shooters are good at racers. Racers are good at avoiding crashers, and crashers are good at bumping into, I think I might have got that wrong. I need to go back and play another dozen games of Gaslands. But you get the idea. The same thing happens here, that you've got the added complexities of some units are better at stopping this guy, and you've got to get the right unit in the right place at the right time, and you've got to be able to stack these effects. Another great example of this is one of your heavy vehicles, you can use indirect fire. And the way indirect fire works, if you've got a scouting unit that has a line of sight to an enemy, then your indirect fire can shoot at that enemy without penalty from anywhere. Now you've got a situation where you have a fairly powerful unit that if you can use it in conjunction with a second unit, if you can get those scouts into position where they can see an enemy unit, you can rain hot death down from the skies on them, and that is a powerful 1-2 combination. It's also a fragile one, because remember that your enemy gets a vote too, and your enemy is not going to let the spotters just sit there and call in that fire for effect. You need to use your support infantry, heavy, light, whatever, to chase off those spotters so that they can't make life easy on your enemy. So I really think that this game, and the little bit that I've played of it, even using these new and improved rules, just kind of tinkering, it really does have a very different feel from Mom and Dad, all right? Mom and Dad are great games, but Junior here is taking things, and it feels a little weird to call him Junior given that he's a Gorgeous hardback book. Hey, look at that. More 15 millimeter. Ground Zero Games. Represent. The other thing we should talk about is vehicles. I have a lovely little Grav missile tank here, and it would be classed as a fighting vehicle. It has a movement of 8 inches, but it doesn't just move around like the infantry do. Infantry can move in any direction, and they're assumed to be looking in every direction. The missile tank is assumed to be looking in every direction as well, but it can't move in every direction. It can reverse at half speed, so it can reverse 4 inches. Alternatively, if it wants to turn, it can turn up to 90 degrees, but that costs 2 inches of movement. In other words, if you wanted to, this vehicle can move 8 inches, or I could turn them all the way around for half my movement, that's 4, and then move forward 4 inches. Alternatively, if I'm trying to get around a corner, I can move up, cost 2 inches to turn that far, move up, and then 2 inches, and now I'm done. That gives these guys, what that means is, on a straightaway, these guys zoom right around. But if you've got a lot of buildings on the table, if you're in a built-up area, they are going to be rather cumbersome. They're not going to be able to cover nearly as much ground because they have to spend movement inches getting around those corners. Wonderful little addition. Absolutely makes this game feel more modern. The other nice touch is that when an infantry unit attacks a vehicle, regardless of the results of the combat, if anybody has to retreat, it's the infantry. In a push, when you have a melee that is fought, normally the guys that move in to attack bounce back. In this case, here's our infantry. I probably should have got some figures out. If our vehicle tries to do an overrun attack, they fight a melee, and the vehicle, it's a push, everybody passes all of their checks. The vehicle is not going to run away from the soft, fleshy bodies. Instead, the soft, fleshy bodies are going to wind up retreating from the vehicle. One more small rule that really adds to the modern and near future flavor of these rules. For the special abilities, they have a sci-fi flavor. Some of these fearsome, flying, fearful, exploder. We've seen these in Dragon Rampant, but you do have things like hive mind and force fields, mechanoids, robots work kind of like undead, monomolecular blades. This was venomous. If every hit that you get with a 6 counts as 2 successes, not just the 1. And then our spellcasters are called psychics because somehow if your wizard wears a lab coat, that makes it not fantasy anymore. And it fairly detailed on the psychic ability stuff. But some of these things, like stun weapon, special insertion, we've seen summoners, but this could be like orbital drops, teleport jumps. We even have undead, right? But I think you could probably take anything from here. It would be interesting to see what special abilities you could bring in from Dragon Rampant, see how spellcasters work up against psychics. But still, again, you've got things like hive mind skimmers, right? We haven't seen those before. And those, again, more sci-fi flavor. And then we've got scenarios. And honestly, the scenarios they're nothing special, right? They're just clear and sweep. Look, you got 10 of them. And one of the things I love about these rule sets is they give you lots of different scenarios. And there's only so much you can do, right? With these scenarios, ambush, right? One team's trying to cross the table and the other team's trying to stop them. Orbital drop, again, some guys are just appearing at random and then, trying to seize objectives. In this case, bottleneck, you've got objectives where you're setting up, objective markers and whoever commands the most of them. One guy's trying to take the objective markers, and if he does, then he wins. And if the other guy prevents him, he does not. We talked a little bit earlier about the detachment lists where, hey, look at this. This is early war conscripts. No, we're doing World War I. Look at that. Late war French resistance fighters. And then, of course, they do the occult free corps, but you don't have to do that. You could just run this as a straight World War II game. I think it would work perfectly well. But each of these, the nice thing is that each of these little, call it mini campaigns or scenario-based, what we call it, settings, has optional rules. So, for example, the urban fantasy, the meanest streets. Now, this is all about the war against the cryptids or alien invasions, perhaps. You've got special rules for civilians. You've got rules for police response. When you start shooting up the warehouses, the cops are going to show up. And, what exactly happens there? Well, you're going to have to buy the rules to find out. But they do have detachments for SWAT teams if you want to do some, Predator 2. And then, of course, 5 minutes into the future, this is your proper alien invasion with the ladies. A lot of cobblestone casting in the collections here. There's quite a few from, I don't recognize, what is this one? Oh, they're not telling us who that one is. The Mantic Games has a pretty good representation in the artwork. And there's more Ground Zero games, yep. Anyway, I think I've said pretty much everything there is to say. New World Order. Yes, of course we'll have elections soon. Wow, that's not funny. That's a little too relatable. Like I said, Road Warriors, Ranked Tech Barbarians, Survivors, you mutants, and again, each of these, the post-apocalyptic, you've got optional rules for just primitive missiles. Here, just for example, you've got zombie rules, and of course you can mix and match to your heart's content. You could play a bog standard World War II, except we're using the Dead Rise. So really thorough book. It goes into a lot of detail in all the right places, and I think that the rule changes that we talked about, base 5 instead of base 6, the firefight rule, the change in morale from rolling 2 dice at full strength but only 1 at half strength, the fact that you can go to ground anywhere on the table, the fact that you can have much greater shooting ranges. Shooting is mostly line of sight. All of these things combine to give Xenos Rampant a very different feel. And don't worry, here in the near future, in the next week or two, we will be getting this on the table, and I'll show you exactly how this rule set feels with some totally not... actually, my collection comes from a mix of Rebel miniatures and Coruscant miniatures. I have some of their mid-tech battle armor. You guys have seen that before, that are totally not the Marines painted in ultra blue. You know what I'm talking about. So we're going to go with like elite battlesuit bastards versus some just, kind of a standard mixed force, and we'll see who comes out on top. Xenos Rampant. It's available now. Get yourself a copy. You won't regret it. I'm praying for you.